Hey everyone, it's Bill T, and welcome to Let's Talk Dubs, the premier air-cooled VW podcast. First things first, who am I? I'm Bill T, Bill Sagrinos from Las Vegas, Nevada. I've had a few feature cars in hot VWs, and some of you might know me from the VW scene here, Southern California, throughout California, Las Vegas, Arizona. Been going to the shows for the past 20 years, really. The reason I'm doing this podcast is I think there is a great need for a good podcast to kind of help the VW community. Less than help, more like just to kind of have another form of media for the VW scene out here. We've got internet, we've got YouTube videos, we've got all kinds of stuff like that. I just thought there's a lot of really interesting people in the VW community that you should get to hear from. So we'll start off this episode as kind of like me, what I'm all about, give you some backstory on me, a little bit of information, and kind of go through a couple of things that we'll be asking some of our guests. So really the crux of this podcast is going to be informational stuff, just kind of discussions about the VW scene. We'll have guests on from time to time. My intention is to interview a lot of the people in the VW scene that are making things happen. You know, a lot of the guys that are in the industry, guys that build show cars, guys that own show cars, guys that build motors, guys that, sell parts. So the VW community is kind of a tight-knit scene, but it's also worldwide. So I've been to shows all over, the West Coast, been to shows all the way around the world, been to Volksworld, Super Show, I've been to EBI. So, and throughout that, meeting all these VW people, an opportunity to meet lots of people from around the world that all share the same passion. So that's kind of the purpose of this podcast, just to be able to express that and communicate, have another forum, something for us to listen to while we're going through our day, getting us by, getting our VW fix. So I'll go ahead and kind of give you some of my history. So the first car that I had featured was the black and red 67 13 window deluxe that was featured in Hot VWs in November 2003 issue. Title of the layout's called Bill's Bus, and it later became to be known as the Bull Run Bus in 2008, 5 years later after it was featured. So after the Bull Run Bus in 2003, it was a little bit of time before I had another show car, because I built, and when I say I built, so I conceptualized the Type 34 Ghia. I remember when I was showing the bus and I saw Randy Gates' split window. I mean, that was one of the cars that when it came out, man, was just stunning. It was detailed beyond any level of comprehension. And that kind of, and I believe, at least this is the history of my opinion, that car set a benchmark in the scene. So when I saw that car, I knew I wanted a car that detailed. I knew that I wasn't capable of building something to that level of detail just because time, patience, and my personal skill set. So I kind of came up with the concept of the car, the design, the interior, all that kind of stuff, and then kind of turned it over to Buddy Hale to help me get that thing done. So that was the 65 Type 34 Ghia on Cosmics. That came out as a cover car in November 2009 Hot VWs. That cover is actually my favorite cover. Being a VW fan for a long time, I love to see the magazines that had cover shots of like garages or car washes or whatever. There's like an active scene versus just a stagnant car sitting there with a girl or something. I just love to see those garage scenes were my favorite. So when I had my second opportunity to be in the magazine, I kind of worked it out with RK where I get it in the, we kind of did a little garage layout in front of my house with a couple of my cars and toolbox and stuff. And so that was pretty fun. Then my third car that was featured was my 1962 Carbon Cab. And the Carbon Cab was featured in July of 2011, Hot VWs magazine. And it was actually, I'm pretty proud of the fact that it salted the cover of the vintage issue. And one of the things I'm the most stoked about was on the cover of that issue, it's me and my double cab and my brother in one of his customers' double cabs that my brother George, who owns the wagon, that George just finished, and I was doing a big gnarly burnout in the crew cab, and it was just one of those things where, I mean, I love that shot, and I wish it would have been a full-page shot. But hey, look, I was able to defile the cover of the vintage special, so that almost gives me even better feeling. So, but all kidding aside, how did I get into VWs? I got into VWs back around 1987, 88. Lived in some low-rent apartments. Family didn't have a lot of money. We lived in the desert, so living in Las Vegas, you're a wannabe California guy all the time. Everything that we do is like, and it was part of my generation, BMX and skateboarding and that whole, kind of trying to be like that California vibe. And we're so close. So many people from Las Vegas, from California. And then VWs were pretty cool. Looking around at school, in high school, you could see people that had Suzuki Samurais and lower mini trucks and stuff like that. But, when you don't have any money, you got to kind of get something you got to build. So being that I was part of the no money camp, we stepped it up and ended up getting into VWs. What kind of got me into VWs is I remember, riding my skateboard, going over to the 7-Eleven and seeing, standing in line waiting to get my turn playing 720 or whatever video game we were playing of the day. Just kind of standing there sucking down big gulps and chili dogs and standing by the magazine rack and just kind of checking out magazines and whatnot. Wasn't really super fixated on what car I wanted. And then, but I was really into that's when, big systems and 215s and one driver seat was all the rage. And so it was just awesome just to sit on a Saturday night, watch the cars driving down Desert Inn Boulevard, just bumping on their way to the strip to go cruise the strip. And it was just, I think, one of my personal opinions, one of the best times to be cruising the strip and stuff when you had all that going on. And I remember one night, I'm in my apartment complex, and I hear this thunderous bass out of nowhere. And I'm like, man, what is that? I mean, and it's loud. I mean, it's like bass, like I've never heard before. So I go running out to the parking lot, take a look, and there's this peach squareback with a white rag top, and it's just scraping across a speed bump coming through. And I mean, it's just rumbling, man. This thing's got 215s in the back, and it's just beating. And I remember it's sitting there on white 8 spokes with white rag top and white scallops on the front. And this thing just looked so cool, man. I was just like, if there's any car cooler than that, I don't know what it is. It was a surf wagon. I thought it was the baddest thing ever. So that kind of that's where it got its hooks into me. And so then next time I'm at 7-Eleven, I started just going through the VW magazines. And then that's just where it flipped a switch for me. And so realizing that I could buy cars pretty cheap, because Volkswagens you could find in people's backyards or whatever. That's kind of where I started getting into them. It's the first issue. I still have one of the first issues that I had back then. It's and I'll put a picture up on it on our video. But I have an issue of 1988, November 1988 VW Trends magazine, and it's got like a red rag top on the cover. And it's actually like a raspberry rag top, but it's not bad raz. It's a different bug. And I still have that magazine sitting here in my garage. And it's like one of those things that's just so cool. And I looked at it and I just thought man, I got to get one of these things. So that's kind of where it started for me. Actually, the title of the ad is Cat's Rag. So, but yeah, so I got that. And then, getting the magazines and just kind of eyeballing stuff. My first bug that I ended up getting was a 62 bug. And then, part of this podcast is we're going to be, when we interview some people, we'll find out what got them into Volkswagens. Like, what was it? What were the things that triggered that connection and addiction? And, one of my most favorite things about the VW scene is there's people from all walks of life. It's not a rich man's game. Anybody, anywhere can find a Volkswagen. I don't care what anybody tells you. There's so many of them out there. You can find an oval window. You can find a rag top. You can find a 21 window bus. They're still out there. The internet hasn't ruined absolutely everything, but it's done a pretty good job of ruining most everything in regards to finding good deals. I still think it's, that's what I love about the hobby is like anybody gets into it. And I think all of us, some of us start out just getting into it because we're broke, and it's all we can afford and it's something that we can work on. And that's kind of what happened with me. the thing that I love about VWs, man, is they're just like, you can work on them yourself. They're not that complicated to work on. You can work on them yourself. You can lower them yourself. You can do all kinds of stuff yourself on them to where, you can get that sense of accomplishment. In addition to that, you can personalize the car yourself. One of the things I really love about them is, especially when you put a big motor in them. I mean, I love having a nice, super fast Volkswagen to kind of surprise those V8s out on the street. And my 63 down the road was one of those. But I'll get back into my first car. So my first car that I bought was a 1962 Bug. Nickname was Swervy. So it was lowered by pulling leaves in the front and relocating torsions in the back, and the leaves were pulled in the front. They forgot to cut the stoppers, so lower trailing arms sat on the stoppers. They didn't cut the stoppers off. So it literally had zero suspension because it was metal to metal in the front, and it literally had the world's worst bump steer. So the car earned the nickname Swervy. It was a super, super Lotus Blossom. This thing had... the driver's side had the rain gutter shaved and one suicide door with no door handle on the outside. There was no door panels, no carpet, no rear seat. It was just two front seat skeletons covered by two pretty fancy sheepskin seat covers. Little 1200cc motor that, I was working at the time at like the Olive Garden. I'd go to Nevada Off-Road Buggy and I'd cash my check, literally cash my check there, because I'd spend, my check would be $200, $220. I'd spend $80 to $150 there buying parts. That's when I was living in the world of finding out that 1600cc stuff didn't fit on a 1200, didn't fit on a 40 horse, but I took the motor, did all the accessories I could, painted it Ford Grabber blue to match the wheels, but it sat on stock smoothies, Ford Grabber wheels, and like I said, the driver's side was customized in this car, and then the passenger side was stock. So stock, and even worse because it had a 65 door on the passenger side, but it was mine. It was $200. It was laying on the ground, and it looked so cool from a distance. I mean, it looked so cool. And, after that car, after the 62, I picked up a 64. I can't remember who I sold it. I traded a 62. The 1962 I traded for like a Nissan hardbody or Nissan 720 crew cab that I never got. It was a total, and it was like I was going to build it, and it needed way more work than I had a skill level for, so that thing ended up getting launched. And then I picked up a 64 from my brother's friend Rick, and he had it gray and white two-tone. So this is right when the two-tone rage starts coming out. And so then we primer it black, so it's black primer with white insert. And then we got that car going for a while, and I'm working at I left working as a cook and moved into the world of car audio and electronics. And working on car audio stuff all the time. I was able to score some JL Audio 8s and put a nice amp in there. I was constantly changing the stereo equipment in that car. And one night, my friend Mitch comes over, and he wants to hear the system. So we live in these condos, and I said, let's take it for a ride around the block. And that was the last ride of the 64 going around the block. I got T-boned, totaled the car. I ended up in the hospital with a ruptured spleen, and this was a couple days before Christmas of 1991. And so I'm laid up for a few months now, and car was totaled. I mean, it was literally teepeed in the middle, like an Indian teepee. I mean, the thing, it split the roof section from the rain gutter. Driver's side seat was touching the passenger door. It was roached, but I had all the parts and pieces for the car, and I was pretty psyched about it. I mean, I had chromies on it, of course, and all the parts and pieces from my 64. So I finally heal up, and sometime out in February of, and it's crazy because I got the receipt right here. I'm looking at it, which I'll post a picture of the receipt when I bought my 63 ragtop. 63 ragtop, man. We go out there, my brother George and I, we go out to Larry's Auto Wrecking here in Las Vegas. And we go out there, and we're just kind of looking for parts, maybe thinking we're going to get a half of a car. I don't know what we were thinking. But we go out there, and George's head pops up like a meerkat, and he's like, "Bill, a ragtop, a ragtop." And he just starts taking off like a gazelle through the junkyard. And then we meet up at this ragtop, man, and there it is, like the classic Corvette summer scene. There's this ragtop just sitting there on the pan. It's mostly complete. light blue. I think that's the turquoise blue, or the aqua blue for 1963. Sitting there, obviously the interior's complete, seats and all that kind of stuff, door panels and whatnot's all kind of rotted away, but just from being out in the desert in the rain. But it was a complete 63, no engine. It just had a transmission and a front beam on it. And so we go up to the office and we're like, man, we want to buy that whole car. Can we buy that whole car? And the guy's like, yeah, we can't really sell the whole car, but I can sell you the floor pan and the front end, is kind of how he described it, which meant we were going to take the whole car out of there. And so I ended up buying the 63. It was February 16th, 1992. I still have the receipt here. I'm looking at it. February 16th, 1982, I bought the 63 Bug. We go home, broke as a joke at the time. I obviously don't have a job because I've been laid up for a couple months from an accident. And my brother and I go grab, we're limping my dad's car down there or something. And I connect with a buddy of mine. We go get some wheels and tires off my Bug, bring those down. And then we go to grab my buddy who lives around the corner, my buddy AMAC, who had a Buick Regal on Dayton's. And I'd done some stereo work for him. And so we needed a way to get that ragtop out of there. So we kind of lifted it up with a forklift. We bolted the wheels on it. And then AMAC showed up with his Regal, and we just kind of tied a rope around the bumper of the Bug and the back of the Buick and put a tire between the two, and didn't have a tow bar or anything. So we just kind of drug that thing back and got it over to his apartment, and then got a tow bar and got it the rest of the way home. But that's the story of how the 63 came to be. And if you notice, just recently I just posted on Facebook on a bunch of forums that the 63 I built from, 1992, and I think I sold it around 1996. So I had it about 4 years, and that car incarnated a couple different times. I drove it with the original seafoam green, I think is the color. It's like a light blue, and drove that car like that with the chromies on it. Swapped all the parts. Had the car running in like a week, George and I, and had that car running like that for a little bit, and then I had it painted red and white. And, kind of went with that whole two-tone look. Had it on Porsche, red 5 spokes at the time, red and white with red 5 spokes. And then I started doing the German look on it. And this was back in 1993. So I had phone dials on it. I bought one of the first sets of lowered spindles. This is before everybody figured out how to narrow a front end. So I put the lowered spindles on there with the 6-inch phone dials in the front, 7 and 16 by 7s in the back. And just kind of had a staggered offset and tweed interior with all the billet machine knobs, and it was just like my favorite car. And I ended up building a 2276 Superflow heads 48s close ratio tranny for it, completely undrivable. I mean, fourth gear was like second gear, and I had the car on the road for like a week, and I mean, I'd spent years just getting this thing finished. I finally get it finished, and I lock up the motor, drag racing the car. The first week racing Jim Barbeau with Desert Racing Performance. He's the one that built the motor for me. And I way over revved the motor and launched it, and I just got mad and ended up selling that car. But yeah, that's the story. That's in a nutshell. It's about an 8-year span of how I got into the VW scene, and throughout all that, I kind of took a break shortly thereafter that, and that'll probably be our next podcast. Will be how I got back into the scene after leaving the scene for a little while, and then when I ended up acquiring the Bull Run bus, or what is now known as the Bull Run bus. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy the stories, enjoy the podcast. I'm hoping that this thing gets some traction and it gets going. If you look at my shirt on the video, it's a shirt for the Wagon, which is my brother's shop. He's our first sponsor. So we're sponsored by the Wagon for all your air-cooled VW needs here in Las Vegas. Full restorations, no tune-ups, just full restorations. George, my brother, does one seriously detailed job when he goes to building some cars. So check him out on Facebook at the Wagon. And I think that's going to do it for our first episode of Let's Talk Dubs. So coming up here, I've got a couple personal episodes we're going to go through, just more stories about some more cars. And then we're going to start having some interviews. I've got some interviews lined up already. be some of the heavy hitters or just some of the industry people in the VW scene, and just kind of get down to, what they're all about, what they're up to, and kind of where their beginnings come from, and, just the kind of stuff that at least I think I want to know, and I assume that everybody else wants to know that too. So make sure you guys click subscribe, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and everywhere else we have it posted. If you're listening to that, leave some comments, give us some good ratings, and spread the word, and let's build the podcast.
A Volkswagen is a nice station wagon to have around the house. The 1974 Volkswagen, covered by VW Motors